Hello, and welcome to what's the very first Birmingham Philharmonic Orchestra podcast. And I'm absolutely delighted today to be saying that we're sitting here with Michael Lloyd, who after 31 years, Michael, I think, 31 years is handing over the baton of the job of music director of the orchestra. Now, Mike, I've been in the orchestra for, about 12 years, played for the orchestra a little bit longer. And I'm sure you probably told this story at the very beginning, but you don't talk about yourself a lot. So now we have the opportunity to find these things out. So take me back to the beginning. Where did you grow up? Tell me about your music education.
I'm a Starport-on-Severn boy. Oh. I was born in Starport-on-Severn, Worcestershire. Not that far from Birmingham,
yeah.
But I was the right side of the River Severn. But my father was born there and brought up there with his brothers and sisters, of which there were 5, 3 girls and 2 boys. Their mother was a very fine musician, Catherine Lloyd. She had studied in Munich, but being of that, what you might call upper middle class at the time of her childhood, when she got married, she was not expected to go into the profession of as a musician. She was a very fine violinist, not bad pianist, but she was a very good teacher. And in her married life, living outside Starport, her husband was involved in Birmingham industry, F.H. Lloyd, some of the big steel industries in the Birmingham area. And they also had a house in Hagley, on the Hagley Road,
okay,
in Birmingham. But she stayed out in Arley Hall and ran lots of school orchestras, amateur orchestras places. But the whole family were very good musicians. One was a violinist, one was a cellist. My uncle was a clarinetist and pianist, and my father was a flautist and pianist. And my eldest aunt, Eleanor, actually became a professional bassoon player and paid. So there was a lot of music. Yep. And my grandmother started me with piano lessons at 7 o'clock in the morning before breakfast every day. And that's where I began. And lots of music around, and yeah, we would often play together as a family, not particularly high standards, but and my musical life just proceeded on from there. I went to boarding school, and the big plus immediately was I found I was a better pianist than anybody else in the first school I went to. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's always a bit of a boost to one's confidence. And that was basically what happened all the way through my boarding school life, and I played my violin in because I just learned the violin as well in an orchestra at school, and then did a couple of gigs with the British Schools Orchestra, but all a lot of fun. But then I sort of didn't really know what I was going to do. My plan was to get into Cambridge on a choral scholarship, but I couldn't sing that well, so I didn't get to Cambridge, and I ended up spending a little bit of time at the Birmingham School of Music to try and have singing lessons for a year between school and university, and reapplying. And I applied to 3 different universities: Reading, Southampton, and the University of East Anglia, and ended up getting a place at the University of East Anglia to read music. And whilst I was at that university, they weren't music students, but I met other students who loved singing songs with piano, whether it was German Lieder or English song, yep, or not pop song. It was definitely classical songs, and I discovered I enjoyed and had a bit of a knack for accompanying singers, and that grew. And at the end of university, I rashly said to my parents I wanted to go further in the profession, and therefore I would like to go in postgraduate study at the Royal College of Music and get a piano teacher there, because my eldest sister had been at the Royal College, and which is what I did. And things took off a bit, and I was good enough to get onto the list at the BBC, and out of that it got to freelance career began to get going. And I was also doing some teaching, so it was a bit of balance in that. And out of nowhere, but it was probably to do with my director of music at university, Philip Ledger, the office of the English Chamber Orchestra rang me up and said, Michael, we've got your name here on a list as a potential pianist for professional work. We have had an approach from Scottish Ballet saying they've just lost a pianist in the middle of a tour. Would you be prepared to go up to Glasgow and join them for the next 4 weeks to do what they need you to do? And I did. And all I could say is that having fallen in love with words and music with the singers I worked with, I'd completely fell in love with music and theatre, and decided this was it.
So where did the transition come then into conducting? How did you move?
At the ballet company.
Okay.
Because I hadn't even remotely thought I would conduct before then. Not remotely.
But the request to go was to be a pianist.
Yes, just and that was fine. But playing for their rehearsals, and I think I was playing rehearsals for Tchaikovsky's Nutcracker, which is huge fun to play on the piano. I was having a wonderful time. The then conductor, lovely man called Leonard Salcedo, who is also a composer, but he was a professional violinist. He used to sit on the front desk of the violins at the Royal Philharmonic, second violinist, I think. But Leonard came up to me one day and said, Michael, you know these ballets pretty well, and you're very musical, and you seem to understand the tempi differences. Are you interested in conducting? I said, oh, I don't know. I'll give it a go. And sort of did. And just bounced it out with a little bit of this. But then I got to conduct a performance of Nutcracker in the Theatre Royal in Glasgow with the Scottish Chamber Orchestra in the pit. And I just had a ball. I just thought, this is amazing. I just completely got the bug to be a conductor. Cut things short a bit, I then got, the Scottish Ballet was a wonderful company. I learnt so much being there and being them. But the repertoire was quite small.
Yep.
They didn't do, they did Nutcracker, they did Giselle, they did bits and pieces, but they were planning a Swan Lake. But I was getting bored, and I was missing working with singers. And out of the blue, again a connection to Leonard Salcedo, there was a vacancy to go as a ballet pianist and conductor to Kassel in West Germany, where Jimmy Lockhart was their music director, who would also had been, or was still at that point, double music director of Welsh National Opera and Kassel. And more or less out of nowhere, I said, yeah, I'm going, and I went. And I spent an interesting year being pianist for the ballet company, but doing some conducting. And at the end of that year, Jimmy called me into his office and said, can you sing? I said, what? He said, can you sing? I said, well, I don't know. So he said, okay, come here. And he had a score of Madame Butterfly or something. Just sing that line off. And so I did. And he said, fine, do you want a job? And I said, what do you mean? I've got one. And he said, no, do you want a job on the music staff of the opera? And I said, yeah, sure. Just sure, why not? And because in England, there was no way, as a growing ballet musician and conductor, you don't switch to the opera house or English National. They don't.
Oh, okay.
There's a complete no. There's a complete no. And so I switched to the opera,
right,
and had to run a bit to catch up and do that. But anyway, I learned a lot and actually began conducting some big operas almost immediately, including Tosca and Lohengrin and Cunning Little Vixen. And amazing is that I ended up my last year in Kassel doing about 6 performances of Lohengrin, getting... And then I moved to Stuttgart, where I didn't do nearly as much conducting. It wasn't on the cards, but that was a bigger house and opera house, because in Kassel they changed the artistic director, and the one who came in was trying to get rid of everybody who was around so he could bring new people in, or his own people, whatever. That used to happen. So I got a job in Stuttgart, which was a lot of fun, and did vast amounts outside the thing, not so much in some conducting, but mainly of vocal ensembles. But Stuttgart had quite high status singers and things like that. And then I needed, for family reasons, to try and get back to England.
Yeah.
And I auditioned at the Royal Opera House as a repetitor, and at Welsh National to be a chorus master, and at English National Opera. And I got a job with English National Opera.
So where was that in terms of the timeline with your introduction to BPO? Because I know I've heard people talking about who were there at the beginning, that you were back and forwards to Germany a little bit. So did that kind of cross over that time?
It was very simply nothing with the BPO until I had got back. I came back from Germany in the early autumn of 1984.
Okay.
And started on a trial with English National Opera in October 84. And over the Christmas performances, Mark offered me a permanent job, so I stayed. And it's from then on. By then on, I had a job with English National Opera, and I had all the opera I wanted to work on, and was conscious that I had done very little concert repertoire.
Yeah.
And the connection to BPO, which my feeling is 85 was the first year I actually worked, because in that first Christmas I came home, my parents had in the Starport area had good friends who had two daughters, both of whom I knew. One was called Jane, and she was a very good oboist and was at the Royal College of Music, and the other was called Helen, and she wasn't planning to be professional because she was training to be a radiologist here in Birmingham. But she played in the BPO.
In BPO, yeah.
And Helen told me, I'm sure it was that Christmas, 84, 85. That was when, but it may have been an entire year later. It's just possible, but I'm not sure. But she told me that that was when the BPO went into meltdown with their then music director, Ken Page. Mm-hmm. And the fact that he treated the orchestra like his toy, yeah, and threw people in and out, and they wanted to take charge of it more. And so Helen said, we are looking for occasional conductors. And so I put my name forward, and they asked me to come and do a concert. And as I said, it was the summer series. So it is possible it was the rehearsing from April through to May and do, yeah, but and that was my first meeting with BPO.
So, and was that your first amateur orchestra?
Not quite, because my father's brother, John, who was a very fine clarinetist and pianist, I said, he was a GP down in Sevenoaks. But his wife Joan was very keen on amateur dramatics, and they did a lot in amateur dramatics down there, including running a Sevenoaks youth orchestra. And I had conducted them once for a, yeah, Rossini overture or something, yeah, but not really much else.
Yeah. So was there a formal process that you went through from being an occasional conductor to being offered the role of music director? How did you transition from one to the other?
What happened was that the bits of conducting I had done in Germany were full-on professional, and but sometimes they were the standard German repertoire. You watched the rehearsals, and then they said you can go and conduct a performance of that. And I'd played all the rehearsals of Lustige Witwe and things like that, and then ended up first time I ever conducted a professional pit orchestra, and up there was the Lustige Witwe in Kassel, and I just remember when the curtain went up, I thought, oh my God, what's going on here, But the issue was that there was potential for conducting in English National Opera, but not big stuff. I wasn't, yeah, there as a conductor. But I was there to be an assistant conductor and follow on, and all of that was there. And it was all operatic repertoire, but I really felt I wanted to get mixed in with the concert repertoire. Yeah. And so when the first concert with BPO, which to the best of my memory was definitely Vaughan Williams' London Symphony, a Dvorak Slavonic Rhapsody, not a Slavonic dance, but one of those ones with the big harp introduction, and the Karelia Suite.
Okay.
That was the first ever full symphony concert program that I remember doing. And it went down well enough, they asked me back a few times, but only as occasional guest conductor. But it meant a lot to me, and being able to do that repertoire and moving on from there in that repertoire.
Yeah.
One little thing that informed some of my approaches to conducting was that Scottish Ballet, when I conducted them a fair bit later on, before I left, Scottish Ballet had a small orchestra which was very often reorchestrated for just single wind. And often people might be sick or they had other gigs, and you'd get depths coming in, and you were doing a performance of Peter Darrow's ballet to Tales of Hoffmann, and these people are sight reading in a public performance. So I very early got used to thinking, let's just check that they're going to play when they need to play. Do you know what I mean? And not all conductors like that, but it's just something I grew up with, and it sort of stayed with me a bit.
Yeah. So were there any particular influences? Who would you say influenced your orchestral conducting?
Survival, not any person.
Oh, okay.
It was literally, do we get through the performance?
Yeah, get through it.
Can we get from A to Z? And and what sort of response do I get back from there? Very few people there made comments. Even in there was a time in Castle early in my conducting career when I couldn't cope with singers who dragged, so the whole performance just got slower and slower, and I had to be spoken to by the orchestral committee. Yeah, so that you really have to sort this out. Herr Lloyd, otherwise you won't. Yeah. But the journey through, and then English National Opera, I began to get conducting regularly, so I felt I was involved and dealing with the fact of coping with that sort of repertoire and that sort of style. But it was definitely initially just BPO that gave me the chance to do concert repertoire, and then of course they went and appointed Robin Page as music director of BPO, and I took the miff and went off and joined Chandos as well. Yes. So I ended up with 2 amateur orchestras, but they'd all fitted into the E&O schedule somehow, and it just meant more chance to do the concert repertoire I wanted to do, and get involved in things like Tchaikovsky symphonies originally and things like that. And then not much later, some of those big things that I wanted to do, like Shostakovich or things like that.
So over that time, do you think the orchestra's changed much? I mean, the culture of the orchestra,
Unquestionably. BPO, the very first effect that I felt in front of them was, Mike Wilde was first horn, and at that stage, the horn section in English National Opera...
We've been very lucky with first horn players in this orchestra.
Mike Wilde, Martin Jones, and then Tim Stidwell. It's quite extraordinary. Yeah. But there was also a big section behind Mike. It was because there was Andy and Martin was in the section. Yes. There was a section of very strong horn players, and I was very conscious of that because at that point the horn section in English National Opera was not that great. And do the Karelia Suite with Mike Wilde on first horn, you just go, what is this? This is amazing. But also the overall strength of the brass. Wind were good players, but it's gradually just changed. It's personnel, it's people, it's commitment, it's the people who stay and decide they want to be there and keep turning up. And one of my philosophies very early on, I learned this is not about them being professional, this is about them enjoying themselves, because otherwise if they don't enjoy the rehearsal, so of course I can criticise or say, no, that's wrong, or that's the wrong rhythm, but you can't say you can't play. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Because if you start saying that to amateurs, they don't tip up to the next week, and then you get, that's something I got used to quite early on was the fact that not everybody was there all the time. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
But I've got used to that. But it's just a question of making sure that they're there to play, so let's play.
Yeah.
And then we try and take it forward from there.
Yeah.
And whether that's had a help rather than me just saying, no, that's bad, that's whatever, I've no idea. But gradually I sort of get the feeling that the members of the orchestra got used to the fact that they would be playing for most of the rehearsal. I may be wrong, but I mean, the feeling is that yes, and that I wouldn't shout at them too much, but I would just try and nudge them in different ways.
Yes.
I do feel that just talking about playing together and following the beat and understanding that side of it helps. So even if I don't do much blather in front of an orchestra, I hope I make sense both with what I do in the hand.
But sometimes it's important that we've just come off the back of our first rehearsal for Mahler 2, and you outlined before we played a note the key important things that you wanted us to focus on. In fact, I'm thinking you probably have you done the whole cycle of Mahler with this orchestra? I think you probably have.
This is one of the most amazing things about my life, about having got into contact with the BPO and only really wanting to be able to do some of the concert repertoire in between. My absolute love of Mahler's music and adoration for what it means in terms of orchestral sound and things like that has meant I've actually conducted all of Mahler's symphonies with the BPO.
Yeah.
Some of them more than once, but only one or two of them more than once. But I've done them all except for the 10th. And I got caught out by that because Chris Bertram asked me in a pub one day, he said, Michael, is Mahler 10 one of your pieces? I said, well, I don't know it at all, and I haven't yet studied the 10th, the Derek Cook version, to see what it's like as a whole piece. And so the next thing I know, Mike Seal's conducting in a program that Chris has arranged, even though I was music director, and all I remember is thinking, that's, but anyway, so that happened. And I will hold up my hand. I hadn't bothered to get to know it, but since then I've got to know it. And I've also had the good fortune to hear not Derek Cook's version, but Rudolf Barschai's version, conducted live by Ashkenazi, actually in Sydney, because I was working with the Australian Ballet there. But I went to the concert hall in the Sydney Opera House and heard him do that. And I was thinking, oh yeah, no. That could be a piece I could do, but to do all of the other Mahler
and especially to have done 8. I mean, that was, for me, that was a really special occasion. And we had a fantastic audience, and
it's always good to do a thing with a lot of chorus.
Yes, of course, because they bring all the audience. Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
But no, I mean Mahler 8. For all the fact that nowadays it happens, but it doesn't happen all that often, and the chance to hear it live. And that, to all credit to Ken Page, before I even knew the BPO.
Yes, because he did it in the Albert Hall. Is that right?
Yes, they did it in the Grand Hall in the university, I think. Whether it's Aston or whether it doesn't matter.
I think it was Birmingham University.
And then they took it to the Albert Hall.
Yeah.
And with a great bunch of singers, but good for Ken Page.
Yeah.
And it certainly meant that I felt, it meant when I started trying to conduct Mahler with BPO there were people who knew roughly what happened with Mahler and why we were doing it.
Yeah.
And Mahler 8 that we did was just a wonderful event, the chance to be in Symphony
Hall,
and do that.
Yeah, and I know that the singers, they walked away incredibly impressed with the standard of the orchestra. I remember speaking to one of them afterwards, and they couldn't believe they were playing in front of singing in front of an amateur orchestra. Are there, apart from the Mahler 8, I mean, which other performances stand out for you? I mean, it's a long time, 30 years. There must be some that you think, that one I'm particularly proud of.
Yes, there are. They're less strong in my memory from earlier years, but I do remember doing a Sibelius 5 and thinking, yes, I've managed to get people to understand. I remember doing something in a rehearsal, and Mike Wire was still playing first horn then, but I did something with just horns and woodwind, And he said something after that, "Oh, thank you for that. It just made it very clear what we were trying
the last
to
movement.
do, you know, whatever it was,
Yeah.
do you know what I mean?" But I would rate my first ever Shostakovich 7 with the BPO as a big event for me,
Yeah.
just because Shostakovich is like that. You get the chance to do a piece of that shape and size, and we did it in Lichfield Cathedral, and we did put the Wagner Tristan and Isolde Liebestod
Yeah.
with it in the program. But I happen to know a very talented young English soprano down to D&O at that stage, who heard I somewhere in the cantina said, "Oh, I'm going to be doing a Wagner with her," and she said, "Oh, can I come and sing?" Because she was just moving into singing Wagner then. And she said, "Oh, I love that. I've done it with the Royal Academy Orchestra. I'd love to do it again." So she came.
Great.
And she came and joined us. And I would say that my joy at being with the BPO, whether as guest conductor or principal or music director, has been the times I've been able to bring my professional colleagues to come and sing with the orchestra, because
Rheingold.
well, Rheingold is the big one.
Yeah.
I was amazed at that.
Yeah.
And also, that definitely almost all of that bunch of highly rated professional singers were all incredibly complimentary about the orchestra. And the event was, for me, very special, particularly when we had the last full rehearsal before the concert. I got the singers to come, most of them anyway. And I remember the week before, one of our first violinists, Christy, had said, "Michael, I really don't get this piece at all." I said, "I know, it's really hard because, you know, there's a lot missing,
Yes.
you know, but you're playing, you know, fabric for which." And she said, "Yeah, I said, "Okay." But she came up to me after the rehearsal with the singers, and she said, "It's just completely changed." She said, "I don't speak German, but I understood exactly what they were going on about and why the music's there and where we're going." And you know, it was for me a huge thrill to take the orchestra through that 2.5 hours of music.
That was the concert where I didn't know whether I'd been insulted or complimented by Chris Morley when he wrote in his critic. He said, "A highlight for me was the rasping of the contrabass trombone." And I still don't know whether that was a good or a bad thing.
He's very well, Chris. I'm very fond of him as a critic of our orchestra, because he's always been very supportive of the fact that we're not professional.
Yeah.
And he's always been quite clear if he thinks it's not being very good. No issues, but almost always he avoids saying it's just an amateur orchestra. And I happen to know that at that concert, my wife was sitting just in front of him, and at the end, as the applause started, he said, "That was amazing." Do you know what I mean?
Yes, I remember the audience reaction to that very well. So, apart from Mahler 10, what else would you say you just wish you had another couple of years to just do those works? There must be something that you've kind of...
Yes, there's a number of things that I would both like to go back to, or that I haven't done that I would like to do. I actually want to go back to, having had such a wonderful time with you guys doing Sibelius 6 and 7 not so long ago. It's a long time since I did 5 with you, and I would love to do 5 again. But no, I do have some. I've just recently taught a soprano, very good soprano, coming up out of she's just out of the conservatoires now. But she's just had to learn the end of Strauss's Salome to do with an orchestra, and I would love to do the Dance of the Seven Veils, and then just go straight into the end just with her. You make a couple of bits, but that's just such an extraordinary, amazing orchestral score. And we've had a lot of fun with Strauss. We've done Heldenleben, we've done big pieces of Strauss that I've loved doing with you all, and that people obviously understand and get there. But so there's that one. I could easily, happily go back to 4 Last Songs, because doing Strauss's 4 Last Songs with you has been, and with Alison Roddy's particularly, has been a big...
Alison joined us for the Mahler?
Alison
Yes.
is joining us for the Mahler.
Yeah.
But the mezzo is a young mezzo that I first knew as a student at the Royal College of Music, right up through the opera course and things like that. And she's out in the world beginning to make waves and do good things.
Yeah.
But Mahler 10's there. I would love to do Bruckner 9 with you. I had a really nice program out there a couple of years ago, talking to Tim and Alistair and people, to do actually the Lohengrin Prelude, some Strauss songs, not the four last songs, but Strauss's the songs that he orchestrated, and then Bruckner 9.
And the 3-movement Bruckner 9?
Yeah, no, just
the 3, not the 4.
Well, the 3,
yes,
not the 4.
Not the 4.
That's it. That's what I meant. Because that adagio, there's nothing you can do after that.
It's just,
nothing you have to do.
Yeah. Absolutely. And especially, one of the things, I mean, we've touched on it, one of the things that we are incredibly privileged, I think, in this orchestra is the wind and brass sections are, they're renowned, but particularly the horn section, and with the Wagner tubas, everything we've ever done that's required the Wagner tubas, you sit and you think, these people call them catastrophes, they're incredibly difficult to play.
I can remember a German horn player when I was there, when they did some Wagner and he had to do the Wagner. He just said, these instruments are a nightmare. There's no way if it's going to work or not.
And yet we always seem to manage to be able to do it.
Well, the Rheingold with Ali leading the horn number 5, leading that for. They were immaculate. Amazing sound.
Yeah.
And yes, I mean, the extraordinarily wonderful thing about being in part of this wonderful group of people, the BPO, is the high standards that have constantly sort of nudged up. The horn section initially, brass section fine, but there were some passengers a bit in there, but then that's shifted a little bit, and we've been very lucky with a run of trumpeters. But the woodwind have shifted gear too, and they've all moved up, and that's just meant that the strings have got better and better too. I mean,
you're going to miss it, aren't you?
Well, there's no question I'm going to miss it.
I mean, you're not going away.
No,
this is the end of your tenure as the music director, but you're still going to be around. I know that because you're still on the committee for the Ludlow Prize, so you're going to be involved in the concerto
I'm a trustee
final.
for the Ludlow Prize.
Yeah.
So, and Tim has already asked me to do next year's Ludlow Prize
the concerto competition.
Competition. And yes, I hope very much that there will be space in whatever Jack is planning with the orchestra and everybody else, that you're prepared to come back to me for the odd program here and there, because I will miss it. It is a part of my life. And if I dare say that one of the drawbacks is the over-familiarity with the M40, I dare say that I will find it difficult not to come and stand in front of you every now and then. Because
you're pretty much an honorary Brummie, I suppose, now, aren't you? Well, somebody who lives in London, comes up every single week, and you, in the 31 years you've seen the orchestra change, you must have seen the city change as well. I mean, it's gone under a huge transformation in that time.
Well, the year between my life at boarding school and before I went to university in Norwich, I lived at home to come to the Birmingham Conservatoire. And in those days, the Birmingham Conservatoire was in the Midlands Institute, which was an old black and Birmingham Central Birmingham building next to the Town Hall. Yeah. In the square around the Town Hall, the one that they ripped down. Yeah. And then all of that went, and then they put up the Adrian Bowles Hall and that conservatoire, and all of that centre area changed, and then they're ripping it all out again. It's very strange. To be brutal, Andy, I don't know that I know what I do, why I do it, other than the bottom line principle is just try and make sure people play enough through a rehearsal. And all my mistakes I will never forget. There was when we did Act 1 Valkyrie, I called everybody in and got stuck in the section before the trombones even played. And I didn't see it on Facebook, but I did see somewhere a photograph. There was a trombonist lying back at the back of up the top of the university, going, "The trombones are working hard this morning," and I thought, "Oh God, I got that wrong," But it goes back to some of the very earliest rehearsals. It was a very fine first trumpet, John Standing or something, his name was, and he was always very good. On a Sunday morning, he'd have the Sunday papers with him, so being a trumpeter, he would have a few bars they'd be reading, and I was crossing away, and then I eventually got to where they entered, and he was still reading his newspaper, and I remember stopping and saying,
nowadays we're just on the phone.
I'm awfully sorry, John, but he said, well, the problem is, Michael, you've been getting up to that point 3 or 4 times already, but you've always stopped just before we played. So I thought, I'll just read my bit.
Trumpeter's life. Yeah.
And you learn from these things.
Yeah.
And you learn from the fact that some, if you have 2 or 3 pieces, some of them only have 2 horns rather than 4. So don't call them all in and rehearse the 2-horn piece first. Find out how to rehearse.
Yeah.
It's about people's commitment and people's time, giving their time and their pocket money for membership fees to the orchestra to go and play every Sunday morning.
If you were asked to join the orchestra, musically and socially, which section are you going to be in?
I'd play the triangle or the bass drum. The only other thing is I'd play the celeste. But no, that's a really interesting one. I don't know. It might even be the bass section, because I love bass lines. I love strong bass presence. And sometimes I think, oh, I'd love to play that bass line down there, whatever's going on.
But socially, you have to come to the trombone section.
Well, socially,
we have the best fun.
Of course, that's very rarely old history. Socially, who goes to the pub? That once upon a time we all did.
Yes.
That changed. Maybe that was why the orchestra. But all of them, yes. Quite a lot of program ideas used to float up when a pint or 2 had gone down with. If you're sitting with Tony Smith and John Franklin and Chris Bertram and Sarah before she was switched out, those pub sessions were very important to me.
They still are. So along the lines of, influences, if you had an opportunity to sit down like we are right now with another conductor, who would you want to sit with?
That's really difficult. I have met and worked alongside when he was at Simon Rattle.
Yeah.
And I sort of hate to say that I just feel like nobody when those sort of people are around. But it's an interesting one, because you learn so much listening to other conductors and watching them work. Yeah, I've watched some that I think, no, I wouldn't do like that.
Yeah. You do have one synergy with Sir Simon Rattle, which is that I think his leaving concert was Mahler too.
Yes, leaving from
leaving from Birmingham.
The difference there is he did it from memory.
Oh right, okay.
I'm told.
Yeah, and televised.
Yes, but, I will tell you this: conducting Sound and Music, I've never known such professionalism. Phenomenal.
Was that West End?
Everybody in the pit, they could misbehave.
In the West End was this?
In the West End, it was a full on. It was the Andrew Lloyd Webber.
Yeah.
How do we solve a problem with that Welsh lass who went into and it was full of stuff. I went, bloody hell, these people work hard. And in the pit. But then we had a problem. I'm a little bit prone to following the music a bit, and the percussionist down there was following me, and the bass player over the end of the pit thought, no, I'm the bass. And he was feeling out of sync, and he got really wild at the end of the pit and began to do this. And the cellist came to me in the break and said, Michael, can you have a word? This is getting really difficult. So I just went up to the bass player and I said, we all get angry in this pit. Pits are there for people to get angry in. I said, but what you cannot do is show your anger in what you're playing. You cannot try and tell me that the bass drum is ahead of you. You just have to play with me. He blinked and
Did he take it?
he was so angry that he would just walked away, but he never did the thing ever again.
Oh, okay.
And everybody knew what was going on, and the percussionist, nice lad, he said, "Look, I'm sorry, Michael, but I just follow your beat." And I know with some of that music, it's not casualness. It's a bit slow. Let's just move it on. Whereas a lot of the other, but it was so professional. Everybody in the pit so professional. And actually, I did once. The most magical moment in my life in that pit was that our main trumpeter, great guy, but he told me one day, he said, "Oh, Michael, we're getting Maurice Murphy. He'll be sitting next to me," because the Deps all came in and sat next to the player for one show.
Yeah.
And he said, "Tomorrow night, Maurice Murphy's coming." Maurice Murphy, the best trumpeter in England, first trumpeter of the LSO, was coming into the pit. And I thought, bloody hell. So he came in. And anyway, so a couple of nights down the line, he came in to play the show.
Yeah.
But that night happened to be the night that our first horn, who was directly in line behind first trumpet, and he was in and out of the pit with his phone and coming back and coming, and he came back late for a number, and he missed his first 3 notes. And so I just ended up looking across the pit like this at him, just standing in front, and Maurice thought I was looking at him. And Maurice went home from that show. Maurice Murphy went home from that show having played perfectly. And he went home and rang the fixer and said, "I don't think Michael's going to be asking me back." And so the fixer rang me and said, what was the matter with Maurice? I said, "What?" And I said, "What was wrong?" I said, "Nothing. He was amazing." What? He said, "Well, he said you were looking at him in fury the entire night." I said, "Oh no, that was Maurice. That was the horn behind who was in and out and on his phone." And I said, "Oh, okay."
So in future, when you give me that look, I'm just going to look at the tips.
Yes, absolutely.
It was all him.
So when you get that Mark Elder blue stare or whatever, it's not that I do that here, but.
Well, thank you, Mike. I mean, I feel particularly privileged to have had the chance to sit here with you, and I would like, on behalf of all of the orchestra, it's probably an assumption on my behalf to speak on their behalf, but we've just loved having you as part of this orchestra. I know that you're going to be greatly missed. We will be looking out for you when we are in our concerts. Hopefully we're going to see you in the audience, and we'll definitely see you back for the concerto final and, as I say, hopefully one or two other ones in between.
Good.
But on behalf of the orchestra, thank you very much.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you very much.